So one of the major compulsive behaviors is compulsive gambling. Like most other addictions, it has two forms, problem gambling and pathological gambling. Problem gambling, gambling behavior that causes problems in an individual's life, either psychologically, physically, socially, or vocationally. And pathological gambling is gambling behavior that is persistent and continual and significantly disrupts all aspects of an individual's life. What's the difference between problem gambling and pathological gambling? It all depends on the individual. They both look an awful lot alike. So which one, when does it become pathological? When you start owing so much money that you can't pay it back. The real difference between problem and pathological gamblers is often time and money. Problem gamblers can't afford to spend as much time and don't have the money to gamble as they want. They average losses of about $3,000 per year. Pathological gambler spends far more time gambling and averages losses of $11,000 a year. The average debt for women entering Gamblers Anonymous is $60,000 and the average debt for men is $100,000. Now, we already talked about this stuff. Harvard Medical School studies estimated that 125 million people in the United States gamble. That's about a third of the population. 2,200,000 of these individuals are pathological gamblers. 5,300,000 of these individuals are problem gamblers. This didn't take into account the 1,100,000 adolescent pathological gamblers. And there are a lot of adolescent gamblers out there. Male compulsive gamblers outnumber female compulsive gamblers by 2 to 3 times, so women aren't as, don't gamble as much as men do. This may be changing with the increase of casinos and slot machines, as women are more likely to use gambling to escape depression, trauma, or relationship problems. Pathological gamblers tend to have other addictions. 25 to 63% of pathological gamblers have other behavioral or substance addictions. One study found that 73% of pathological gamblers had alcohol problems. The same study found 38% of pathological gamblers had drug problems, 60% smoked, 50% had mood disorders, 41% had anxiety disorders, 60% had personality disorders. So we're dealing with a casino, and the casino makes most of their money off of the pathological gamblers. They make most of their money off of these individuals. And what's the percentage? 73% of them have alcohol problems. Okay, so if I don't want you to win, I want you to lose. What should I do if you're a pathological gambler? Most of my income comes from you. So what should I do for you? I'll give you anything that you want, including free booze. And if I give you free booze, you're not going to gamble nearly as well because you're not going to be as elusive. So all that free liquor that they hand out at casinos makes a lot of sense. They make money off of all that free liquor. They get those people drunk, and then of course they're not as functional as they were before. So that all makes sense. All this free liquor that they give out. The group that has seen the greatest rise of gambling is among older adults. I mean, we're talking about ancient people that live in nursing homes. One survey of residential and assisted care facilities found that 16% went to casinos at least once a month. And guess what they did with their Social Security check? They gave them free gambling for the first $10 or $15. And then they gambled away the rest of their Social Security money. Of course they did. This behavior is exacerbated by casino-sponsored trips and day trips, which were found in 2/3 of the facilities. When I was at Ashford, right up the hill was a nursing home that was run by the church. Ashford used to be owned by the Sisters of Mercy. Is that right? No, not the Sisters of Mercy. Sisters of St. Francis. Yeah, they were the Sisters of St. Francis. But they ran the nursing home and they also ran the college. And they had other organizations that they worked with around the city. There was a casino in Clinton. One of the largest casinos in Iowa is the Wild Rose Casino. And twice a month they would take the residents of the Alverno, the Sisters of St. Francis nursing home, and they would take them down to the casino to gamble twice a month. At the beginning of the month, almost everybody went. And of course, in the middle of the month, only the people that still had any money would go. But they would give them free gambling. The first $10 or $15 was free. And of course, as soon as they lost, what did they do? They gave them free food as well, which was kind of interesting. But they didn't give them free booze. But they did take all of their money, that's for sure. Nobody ever left with any money. Nobody ever won. College students gamble at a higher percentage than any other group. 42% of college students gamble. 26% gamble weekly or more frequently. Heavy college gamblers were more likely to be smokers, heavy drinkers, and or heavy marijuana users. These individuals average lower grades and more frequent absences, mainly because they're gambling. A lot of them gamble online. And of course, it's like a video game for them. So they will play this game for an extended length of time, and they'll spend 8, 10, 12, 24, 48, 72 hours just gambling. And of course, they miss class when they do that. Different types of gamblers. Recreational social gamblers are able to separate gambling from the rest of their lives. If this sounds an awful lot like alcoholics, it's exactly like alcoholics. We have social drinkers. We also have social gamblers, and they're able to gamble away their $20 and then they're happy. There are also, just like there are social drinkers and social gamblers, there are professional gamblers. Now, of course, there's not professional drinkers, but there are individuals that drink almost every day. The professional gamblers, their main source of income is gambling, and because of this, they are able and willing to take losses in their business. And this is what was going on with the individual that shot up Las Vegas. He was a professional gambler. He claimed to lose as much as $1 million a night, or to gamble $1 million a night. Antisocial gamblers may steal to gamble and have no conscience about the thievery and corruption that they represent. Really kind of interesting people. Gamblers are, especially these antisocial gamblers. They'll borrow money from everybody, from anybody. And as far as they're concerned, money isn't money. Money is something to play with. So as far as they're concerned, if I give them $100, they don't have to pay it back, because it doesn't mean anything. It's just a game. It's just play. So borrowing money from their parents, borrowing money from anybody, selling things that don't belong to them. I had a neighbor when I was in Washington, D.C., living in Washington, D.C., and this guy was a missionary, and he lived in a house that somebody gave him, and he drove a car that the same person gave him. So the house came with a car, and he was a missionary. And he was waiting to go on his next mission. So this was a religious man. This was a man, and he preached constantly. If you talked to him, he would preach it. He would proselytize, try to convert you to his way of thinking. Try to convert you, and then he would ask you for money. And even if he didn't convert you, he would still ask you for money. As it turned out, he was also a gambler. And he would go and he would lose all the money. And if he got money, if he got any money at all, he would take it and he would gamble. And sometimes he'd be gone for 2 or 3 days. Why? Because he was winning. And he would play until he lost everything. That was the way he did things. Well, he was a religious man. He was a missionary. He was a missionary to Indonesia, which is a Muslim country, and I'm not sure if that's the safest place for anybody to go. Anyway, and he had a son, and the son stayed in the house, and so he got all this stuff for free. His food came from the mission. And sometimes he'd sell the food for money so that he could go out and gamble. He sold this guy's car. This other person's car. He sold his car so that he could go and gamble. And then lo and behold, before he got caught, they sent him on his mission. So he was finally gone. And he left his son holding the bag. And so the guy came back and he wanted to know where his car was. It was a Cadillac. It was like this huge Cadillac. And he wanted to know where his car was, and the kid said, well, I guess my dad left it at the airport. I guess. You know, and he's living in this guy's house. Of course, he's not a missionary. It's the other guy that's a missionary. This is his son. So the wife and the husband are gone. They've taken off. This kid's supposed to go, this is his senior year of high school. And there's no car. You know, there's supposed to be a car with the house, and the kid's living in the house and smoking pot and doing all kinds of interesting things. Anyway, everything turned out badly for the missionary. The missionary is now in Indonesia, I guess. They didn't call him back. But he lost, tens of thousands of dollars. People would give him money for the mission, and he would gamble it away. Lovely fellow. My across the street neighbor would come over and proselytize to me all the time. He called me a hard case. I'm a hard case. Of course, this guy's gambling away everybody's money, and I'm a hard case. College students, okay, sorry, I went the wrong direction. I apologize. There are two subtypes of pathological and problem gamblers. Action-seeking gamblers are frenetic, excited, and are always seeking to escape. Escape-seeking gamblers are drawn to gambling machines and are often responsible people with good jobs, but they begin gambling to escape from their emotions or just to escape from boredom. My missionary friend was an action-seeking gambler. He just wanted to lose. He needed to lose all the money that he had. He couldn't hold on to money. And his idea was that God will provide. He's told me that practically every time I talk to the guy. He was just irritated me in the way. I would mow my lawn. He didn't like the way I mowed my lawn. And he kept telling me that there was one way to mow my lawn and I wasn't doing it right. It was on a hill. And I was mowing up, I was mowing down, and then I'd mow up. And then I'd go down, and then I'd mow up. And it put a different pattern in my grass. But what he wanted me to do was go across because it was easier to mow across a slant like that. And I told him, well, I don't care if it's easier. I'm doing this mostly for my own physical well-being. So mowing up the hill doesn't bother me at all. And he kept telling me how stupid I was for not doing things easy. That I was doing everything incorrectly. I was putting the wrong pattern in my driveway, in my yard. That was my problem. And that's the reason I never go to heaven, because I always did things the hard way, and I never did things the right way. There was a right way and a wrong way to do everything. And he was an action-seeking gambler. And he would gamble, like I said, sometimes he'd be gone for days because he was winning, and he couldn't come home with any money. He had to lose all the money. That was the rule. The symptoms of persistent, recurrent pathological gambling: preoccupation with gambling, reliving past gambling experiences, planning future gambling, increasing the amount of money used in gambling, unsuccessful attempts at stopping or curbing gambling, restlessness and irritability when not gambling, using gambling as an escape, chasing, trying to recoup past losses, lying about gambling, especially to your spouse, financing gambling through illegal acts, jeopardizing job or relationship and education to gamble, expecting others to bail out the gambler's debt. And as I said before, these individuals, money doesn't mean anything to them. If you bail them out, you'll never get your money back. And the reason you'll never get your money back is because money doesn't mean the same thing to them as it means to you. It may mean a car to you, it may mean food for your family, it may mean paying your mortgage, but to that individual, money just means, it's like methamphetamines. When you are a meth head, then the most important thing in your life is methamphetamines. To this person, the most important thing to them is not the money that they spend, but the gambling. It is the gambling that they need. And they need it to be exciting. So if you play cards with this individual, they have to play for money. If they don't play for money, they won't play at all. Because that's the only type of excitement that they need. They have to feel like they're losing or winning. The way I found out that this guy was a gambler was, I had known him for months. I had already known him for months, and the guy came over and proselytized all the time. Was always trying to cadge money from me. Well, do you have $5? Just $5. Give God $5. Give Jesus $5. That kind of thing. Finally, after I'd known him for about 3 or 4 months, he came over one day and he was telling me about how he won. And I was thinking, well, he must have converted somebody or something. No, he was talking about winning at the casino. At the casino right outside of Washington, D.C. That's what he was talking about. And he talked about how much he won. And I said, well, that's great. Now you can go on your mission. And he said, no, it's all gone. Okay. But he didn't talk about losing the money. He just talked about winning the money. Like, it was still there, but of course it wasn't there. The feeling was still there. That this charge that he got from winning was still there. It was just kind of bizarre. Why the hell did I have to live next door to this guy? Why in the world does it happen to me? Anyway, and they expect others to bail them out. This individual, if he owed any money, he used his missionary money, and half the time he would gamble his missionary money away anyway. Winning phase, in the beginning, the bets are small and they are happy just to win or break even. Then as recreation becomes compulsion, the reward becomes more the stimulation of the action, and they seek to prolong the action as long as they possibly can. Winning becomes secondary to staying in the game. And of course, that was what this guy was doing. And he would stay in the game until he lost all of his money. In 70 to 80% of the cases with compulsive gamblers, the beginning of their craving for gambling started with a big win. The gambler begins spending more and more time wagering, and their conversations resulted with lionizing their wins, and when mentioned, minimizing their losses. And we see the same thing with individuals that drink. We see the same thing with individuals that are addicted to anything. I can remember talking to people who were recovered alcoholics back on Fort Belknap. They were recovered alcoholics. So what did they talk about? Well, they talked about the times when they were drinking and when they got really drunk and something funny happened. Remember the time that I got like really snockered, and then I got in the car and I ran it into the ditch and I tried to drive it out of, and they're telling these stories. They haven't been drinking for, they've been sober for 15 or 20 years. And what are they talking about? They're talking about the time they drove a car into a ditch when they were drunk 20 years ago. Well, this is nuts. I had a friend that told me about one night, I think I told you this story, that he was, they were rodeo riders, and they got really snockered one night, and they were with this white Canadian rodeo rider, and they decided that they were going to rob him. So they tried to kill him. They hit him with a stick. And evidently Canadians have skulls that are like really, really thick. Anyway, or the fact that they were so drunk that they couldn't really swing the club very hard. Anyway, they hit him in the head, and he woke up and he thought it was funny. He's bleeding down his face. So he told me this story. Well, this guy hasn't had a drink in 30 years. So he's telling me all these stories about when he was a rodeo rider and when he was a drinker. Crazy. And anyway, these guys will lionize their wins, and they'll try to minimize their losses, of course, just like alcoholics will do. The losing phase begins with a losing streak, which is inevitable due to the simple laws of chance. Anybody that tells you that they always win, and I don't care what they say, it doesn't really matter, all they're doing is focusing on their wins. And they're not accepting, or they're not admitting their losses. I had a lady that told me every time she went to the casino, she won. And she was one of my students, and finally she graduated, and then she got leukemia, and she was dying. And she came to me before she died, and she admitted to me, I don't always win. It was one of the things that was really eating her. This is one of the things that she had to tell me before she died, was the fact that she lied to me about being always winning. So she had to tell me that before she died, so that she could die in peace, as that turned out. I didn't know she was dying, of course. I didn't realize she had leukemia. And she died like 2 weeks later. She had to come to my house and tell me that she lied about winning. As funny as that is, or not funny, she died 2 weeks later. I guess that's not funny at all, is it? As their large losses are met with larger wagers as they are trying to recoup their losses, and this is known as chasing. And this is where the casinos make their big bucks, because if somebody's on a winning streak or losing streak, then they will gamble more and more and more and more. And of course, this is known as chasing. As the gambler continues to lose, they will dip into depression, they will seek isolation, become irritable, and they will lie about their situation. So they become as good liars as alcoholics do when they're losing. When they're winning, they'll tell you anything. Or when they're dying, they'll tell you anything. The desperation phase. In the desperation phase, the pathological gambler may lose their job. They'll max out their credit cards. They'll borrow money from friends and family, promising to pay them back. I'll give you back this next week. Perhaps they'll turn to illegal activities to hide their addiction. They'll start stealing. Maybe they'll embezzle. Drug dealing. If we have somebody that steals money, a lot of times it has to do with the fact that they are gamblers. And since they are gamblers, remember, money doesn't mean anything to them. Money is pleasure for them. It doesn't mean the same thing it means to everybody else. So these individuals, if they get a hold of money, it's gone. One of the problems on the Fort Belknap Reservation is that a lot of times, if you give them money, they disappear. I know that's mean to say, and I apologize. I was on several committees, powwow committees. And a lot of times we would, do bingo on Thursday nights. Oh my God! And you're working for $100. And of course, all the money goes back into the pot for the powwow committee. And then all of a sudden, you've got half as much money as you thought you had. And you're going, wait a minute, what happened? Well, I had a friend that I was on his powwow committee, and I was working my ass off. And he was working hard too, but so he had all this money, he had all this cash, because he needed cash to do the next bingo. We needed cash to do bingo. So he would keep it. And he said, I went to visit my girlfriend, and I had it hidden in the pants leg of my other pair of jeans. And this guy came in and he beat me up, and I don't know how he knew where it was, but he looked in the legs of my jeans, and he took all this money. It's like $600 or something. And of course, we're all just kind of, yeah, right, okay. I'm sure that's exactly what happened. And it was gone. All the money was gone. All the money that we had worked so hard for was all gone. I don't know, he probably had a really good weekend, so as long as he had a good weekend. Oh, it was so tragic. We were working our tails off trying to make money for the powwow, and it all just disappeared. I know, this guy beat this guy up and found it in his pants. He stole his pants. That's what happened. He stole his pants. And the money just happened to be in the pants that he stole. So this guy came into his motel room just to beat him up and steal his pants. I mean, that happens like every day. People, yeah, they'll beat people up just for their pants. Now the question was, he had a clean pair of pants, he had a dirty pair of pants, right? The guy steals the clean pair of pants. He didn't steal the dirty pair of pants. But he came in just to steal his pants. At the same time, he stole I lent this guy one of my baseball shirts. And he stole that baseball shirt. So I didn't have that shirt. And I like that shirt too. But I'd lent it to this guy, and now that was gone as well. Desperation stage, okay, so bad things are happening to this guy. They're borrowing money from friends and family. And the idea was, well, we need to make this back up. So we're thinking, well, you need to get a job. I mean, this guy wasn't doing anything. You need to get a job. No, what he meant was, he wanted me to make it up. He wanted me to give him $567 or whatever it was. He wanted me to make it up. I didn't do it. Perhaps to turn to illegal activities, and of course in this case he was embezzling. The gambler may bankrupt their families and suffer from divorce, of course, because they are not taking care of their family. Money doesn't mean anything to them. It means pleasure to them. It doesn't mean paying their debts. Giving up phase. In the giving up phase, the gambler is no longer trying to recoup their losses, but seek the game to stay in the action. 72% of gamblers experience depression when they hit bottom. And of course the question is, how low is low? When do they hit bottom? How do we know when they hit bottom? How do we know when they hit bottom? How much money do you have to owe somebody before you've hit bottom? We do have a figure. Dollars? What's the average amount of money that a male owes when he goes to Gamblers Anonymous? $100,000, exactly. That's hitting bottom. That's the average, hitting bottom. So for a woman, it's $60,000. For a man, it's $100,000. That's when they hit bottom. So why have they gone to Gamblers Anonymous? They're already in debt for $100,000. How long does it take you to pay off $100,000? How much money do you make a year? How many years is it going to take you of living on nothing, outside with no house, in a tent maybe, if somebody lends you a tent, eating no food, driving no car because you can't afford car payments, no gasoline because you can't afford gasoline? How many years is it going to take you to pay off that $100,000? I make about $50,000 a year. It'd take me 2 years of living on nothing in order to pay off my gambling debt. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of years. Suicide attempts occurred in 17 to 24% of these gamblers. When bottom was hit, this is usually the time when the gambler seeks treatment, of course. And how much is it? $100,000 is hitting bottom. For the compulsive gambler, it isn't the money that they are seeking, but the rush from the large win and the zoning out that gambling affords them. About 1/3 of compulsive gamblers recover on their own, usually triggered by devastating financial losses. For the other 2/3 who seek treatment, the techniques used include antidepressant therapy, anti-craving drugs like naltrexone, and of course Gamblers Anonymous, where they're around other people. And so if you've ever been to a Gamblers Anonymous meeting, guess what they talk about at Gamblers Anonymous meetings? I'm sorry? Sure, but what aspect of gambling? What does everybody talk about? They're all there because they've hit bottom. So what the hell do they talk about? Their losses?
Addiction. Addiction to gambling.
Sure, but what, just like the alcoholic who talks about all the fun times they had when they were drunk, guess what gamblers talk about?
All the times they won.
Making the big score. Exactly. Making the big score. Does that help them stay off or stay away from gambling? Well, actually, serves the other purpose exactly. I know. It just drives you nuts. Compulsive people. Compulsive shoppers and hoarders have the same cravings as do gamblers and drug addicts, but in this, the high is caused by the feeling they get when they purchase an item. 74% of the time, compulsive buyers purchase items on impulse. 50% of the household income for these compulsive shoppers goes to the paying of their shopping debts. Not buying food, not paying for the car, not making sure the kids have baseball shoes during baseball season. No, most of it goes to compulsive shopping. This is really weird. These people are really strange. I had a friend, I played softball with this guy. So we're in Germany. And we were traveling to a ball game in Holland. So we had to cross the border to go into Holland. So we stopped at they have Autobahns over there, and they're kind of like toll roads, except there's no toll. But they have those islands where they sell stuff, and you can buy gas for a lot of money. It's not important. So we stopped at one of these places so that we could all get out and urinate and maybe get something to drink. So we all got back in the van. We're waiting for Ray to show up, and all of a sudden Ray comes running out of the store, and he says, "Get in, really fast! Let's go!" And the proprietor came running out of the store. He's looking around trying to find somebody, and it was Ray. Ray had stolen something. Ray had all the money in the world, so why in the world did he need to steal something? He was a kleptomaniac. He had to steal stuff. He had to feel like he was getting away with something. He stole a pair of sunglasses, German sunglasses. You know how much they were worth? These were pretty cheap things, and he didn't even want them. He gave them away. As soon as he got in the van, he gave them away. And of course, everybody's just pissed because, I mean, if the guy holds the pole aside, they're going to chase us across the border here. They're going to arrest a whole softball team, team of softball players. We would be implicated. What would happen next? Well, he would get in trouble potentially. Anyway, nothing happened. They didn't call the pole aside. It was only a 12-mark pair of cheap-ass sunglasses. He just wanted to steal it to get away with it. When I was in college, we had a discus throw, and this guy was a kleptomaniac. He would steal anything, just to do it. His family was rich, but he would steal things just to do it, just to get the feeling of accomplishment. And half the time he gave the stuff away, just like my friend Ray did. Oh, Ray was such a mess. Compulsive shoppers tend to buy items that enhance their sense of uniqueness. Women will buy jewelry, clothes, and cosmetics. Men will buy high-tech electronics and a lot of sporting equipment that they'll never use. Depression seems to be the main impetus behind their compulsive shopping. It seems worse during the winter holidays, so this is the time when they accrue 40% of their debt, is during the winter time, when they have the winter blues. Sad they have sad, seasonal affective disorder. Antidepressants reduce their urge to compulsive shop, so that is how we treat them. Collecting, accumulating, and hoarding are offshoots of compulsive shopping. The individuals gain self-worth and self-esteem from the objects that they own. Let me see. It's not going to work. I'm going to try. Oh, maybe it will. Let's see if this works. Nah. Go back. Let's see if this works. Pictures of hoarders. Omar Sharif. Whoops, the page you requested does not exist. Okay, sorry about that. Sorry about wasting your time. All right. Come on. These collectors and hoarders may buy valuable items, contemporary fads, or accumulate valueless items. There are cases of people who are unable to throw newspapers and magazines away. People will also hoard animals, cats, dogs, birds. I've told you, I've told some people, I'm sure Edison remembers all the stories, but we had one lawyer that was a hoarder, and she couldn't throw away magazines and newspapers. She needed it for her research. And of course she had cats, so cats urinated all over the newspapers, as cats would do. Anyway, it was a mess. And of course, something had fallen on her. One of her stacks had finally fallen on her. And so they called us out, and I was working in the emergency room, and I got to go out with the crew because nothing was happening that night. So I went out with the EMT group, and we went out to pick her up. They told us we needed, that we would have to transport her. So we're thinking, of course, well, we'll just take the gurney in the house and everything will be fine. Well, she was a path person, and the paths were about this wide. Now, the strange part was that she was about this wide, but her paths were about this wide. The only way that she could get through the paths was to go like this. Now, I could walk through the path, because I don't have a fat ass like she does. I mean, that was me. I could make it. As a matter of fact, all of us could make it, but the problem was we couldn't get the gurney in. So what we had to do, we had to get a stretcher. We couldn't use a gurney, we had to use a stretcher, just a piece of material between two sticks, and that's what we had to use to get her out of there. But it didn't work. It only worked if we turned it on its side. And this lady was big. She was a big lady. She was tall, and she was also kind of fat. Anyway, so we had to turn it on. We had to strap her into the stretcher, and we had to carry her out sideways. It was a mess. We kept running into things, and she kept screaming, "Don't knock that over, that's a special pile." Everything was a special pile. Every pile of useless shit she had in that place was a special pile. And by God, every time we bumped into something, she was screaming at us, telling us that there was something. And she smelled like cat urine. The whole place smelled like cat urine. But she smelled like cat urine. It was horrible. She was a lawyer, and she used to try cases, not try cases, but she was a defense attorney. And the judge kicked her out of court. They would kick her out of court because she smelled so bad. She never washed her hair. I mean, it was one of those horrible situations. Anyway, so we took her in. She had a broken leg. And they cleaned her up. They sent her back. And it was like 2 weeks later that we got another call from the same place. She had tripped and fallen down, and she'd broken her cast, and she had re-broken her leg. Oh, it was just a mess. It was just a mess. Anyway, I hated going over there. Of course, they wanted me to go again. We were a little bit more busy that night, and I opted not to go. And of course, they pulled me in anyway, and I went out to this lady's house. Beautiful mansion. She had this huge mansion, full to the brim with crap, with newspapers and magazines. Beautiful house from the outside. You go in, and boy, I'll tell you what, the ammonia smell just punched you right in the nose. Cats and dogs. Lots of other stories about hoarders. We won't go into that. 1980, 15% of the adult population in the United States were considered obese. By 2005, 33% of the adult population were considered obese in the United States. So in 25 years, we've doubled the number of adults that are obese. Tragically, only 33% of the adult population are of normal weight. The rest of the people are either close to being overweight or they are overweight. The average height of the United States female is 5'4" with a weight of 164 pounds. The average model in the United States is 5'9" with a weight of 110 pounds. So this is what the average woman in the United States looks like. She's 5'4" and she weighs 164 pounds. But the models that we have that are showing us their clothes and what we're supposed to look like, and what you're supposed to look like, not me, of course, but the average model is 5'9". She's 5 inches taller, and she weighs 54 pounds less. So she's tall and skinny. But the reality is most women in the United States are short and relatively squat. There are 3 eating disorders, anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. Anorexia nervosa is body image distortion and an addiction to lose weight. These individuals are skinny to the point of malnutrition. And very frequently, this is the leading cause of death of all the mental illnesses. People that are anorexic die more frequently than anybody else. And usually they starve to death. Well, that's not true. Usually they die of heart failure. because they're not taking in enough nutrition to maintain themselves. Bulimia nervosa is eating excessive amounts of food and then controlling weight by purging, vomiting, fasting, or excessive exercise. Binge eating disorder, eating excessive amounts of food with no attempt at weight control, and that's binge eating disorder. Compulsive eaters feel powerless when dealing with food. These individuals tend to be obsessed with food. They use food to escape undesirable feelings, boredom and depression, secretive behavior. They have secretive behavior, guilt, and they're in denial about the fact that they are compulsively eating. They continue to overeat behavior despite the harm that it is doing to them. They are in denial about the fact that they have a problem. Of course, all of these compulsive behaviors are in denial about the fact that they have a problem. If you ask a compulsive gambler, do you have a problem? They'll tell you no. They're right on the edge of winning all their money back. Right on the edge. And then they're going to have a big score. So when you talk to an alcoholic, what do they say? They can quit anytime they want. If you talk to a meth head, well, first of all, he's not going to admit that he's using meth. But if he does, he can quit anytime he wants. It's not controlling his life. It's just amazing. Hoarders. If you ask a hoarder, what are you doing with all this stuff? Well, this is all really important stuff, and this is stuff that I need. As soon as I'm done with it, I'm going to throw it away. I'm going to get rid of it. And then their house just slowly accumulates more and more stuff. I had a friend that was enamored with mechanical things, especially car parts. And this guy had car parts all over his house. His dining room table was covered with car parts. The sink where he was supposed to be washing his dishes were full of car parts. So you would think, well, this must be a bachelor. Only bachelors would do something stupid like this. No, he had a wife and 3 children. Yeah, and they ate off their laps in the living room, watching television, around a motorcycle. He had a busted down motorcycle in the middle of his living room. It was an Indian, okay? It was an Indian motorcycle. And because it was an Indian, he claimed that he needed more parts. But it's really, at this time, of course, they weren't doing anything with Indian motorcycles. They were all antiques. So he just needed more parts. And when he got new parts, he was going to put that Indian motorcycle together, and it was going to be worth, $100,000. Like any motorcycle's worth $100,000. Okay. So all these compulsive people have the same answer for everything. They're all in denial. And this is one of the things that you have to notice. You see somebody and you talk to them and you can see that they have this problem. Just ask them if that is what they're going to do about it. And they'll tell you they don't have a problem. I don't have a problem. You have a problem. Why do you have a problem with me drinking? All of a sudden they try to reverse things and try to make you the problem instead of them. And of course, hoarders. I love hoarders. They're my favorite people. This guy drove me nuts. Something fell off my car. It was one of my wife ran into the side of the garage with the rear view mirror, knocked off the rear view mirror. And so I had this rear view mirror. So I ordered a new one and of course replaced it and so everything's fine. So for some reason he was over at my house when I threw that mirror away. Oh, no, don't throw it away. Don't throw it away. I can use that. He did. And I went over to visit him several times in the next 2 or 3 years, and that mirror was right there on his coffee table. Like my mirror was the most important thing in his whole life. It was broken. But if you asked him if he had a problem, the whole house smelled like gasoline and oil. You know, that smell of... It was like going into somebody's garage where they've been changing their oil on the floor. That's what his house smelled like. And there was grease all over the place. It was a mess. What are we doing here? We're getting rid of these people. Okay. 9.3% of the U.S. population is diabetic. About 19,300,000 people. 26% of the U.S. adult population are at risk of diabetes, about 54 million people. 15.5% of American Indian adults have diabetes. 10% of African American adults has diabetes. 6.5% of Mexican American adults has diabetes. 5.6% of white adults has diabetes. So this is a really serious problem. For some people, it's worse. So if you're an American Indian, you're more susceptible to diabetes than just about all other populations in the United States. So you need to be careful. More careful than I do. I don't have any diabetes in my family, but I'll bet you everybody has diabetes. You have a relative with diabetes. Do you have a relative with diabetes? Do you have a relative with diabetes? You don't? Are you sure you're Indian? Edison, of course, has a relative with diabetes. Of course, okay. But I don't, so I don't have to worry about it. Or do I? Maybe genetically I'm immune to diabetes. Irmis and I.
No.
Are we cousins? Are we related? It is not uncommon for someone with an eating disorder to have a co-occurring disorder as well. 12 to 18% of anorexics abuse tobacco, alcohol, amphetamines, prescription drugs, or over-the-counter substances. Why would an anorexic smoke? Why? What does tobacco do for you? It makes you feel good. Yeah, sure, it makes you feel good. What else does it do? It does. It suppresses your appetite. Great. This lady with no appetite whatsoever needs to suppress her appetite. 30 to 70% of bulimics abuse tobacco, alcohol, amphetamines, prescription drugs, or over-the-counter substances. Why would a bulimic? Well, it's the same answer. Actually, it's the same damn answer. These individuals are trying to lose weight. What are they doing to lose weight? They're vomiting. They're taking laxatives and losing a lot of water weight. So tobacco can only make sense as far as they're concerned. Most eating disorders begin during adolescence. They tend to be chronic and affect women more than men. 3% of women suffer from one of the 3 eating disorders. In high school, 33% of girls and 16% of boys show symptoms of one of the eating disorders. Look at this picture and tell me who you think this lady is. This is a famous lady from television. She's on a reality show. Do you know who it is? I'm sorry? Snooki, yeah. That's Snooki. That's Snooki. That's Snooki when she was in high school. Do I have a picture of her when she's not in high school? No, I don't.
Jersey Shore.
Snooki, yeah. Now this is something interesting about Snooki. Do you know where she's from? The Jersey Shore? She's from New Jersey? She's actually not from New Jersey. I'm sorry. She's adopted, yeah. But where is she from? What ethnicity is Snooki? I'm sorry? Chile, yeah. She's from Chile. She's Chilean. So what ethnicity is she? Besides Chilean. What ethnicity is she? Is she black? Is she white? Is she Mexican American? Is she Hispanic? Is she Hispanic? She's from Chile. I guess she could be Hispanic. It turns out she's not. She's 90% indigenous. That's why she's so short. The natives in that area, she's Quechua, and they're little bitty guys. They're kind of short people, not very tall. Anyway, that's why she's so short, because she's actually indigenous. Look how skinny she is. How many indigenous ladies do you know that are that skinny? You were that skinny? Were you anorexic? No. Okay. You're a cross-country person. No, you just ran a lot. Well, she was a cheerleader, so she jumped a lot. Okay. Of course, she's had a couple of kids now, so she's not anorexic anymore. She's also not as big as she was. She was kind of pudgy. That's a nice way to say it. She's more than, and then she lost a lot of weight. She actually became anorexic again after Jersey Shore went on television. She lost a lot of weight when she got married and had a baby. Now she's of normal weight. At least the last. Well, they're going to have another show on one of these days, aren't they? I think they are. Yeah, Jersey Shore is coming back. We're going to see them one more time. It looks like The Situation. Is that what he calls himself? Oh, you know The Situation. The Situation is having tax problems. He's going to jail. So they have to do it before they take him off to jail.
Well, he's on that one show too about the most terrible chef or something.
Oh no. Oh yeah, but that's just what.
Or worst possible chef or something like that.
Yeah, they got him for tax evasion, so he's going to jail for a couple of years. One of the frightening statistics dealing with anorexia is that the age of onset has dropped from 13 years to 9 years. What grade are you in at 9 years? The third grade? Is that the third grade? Yeah. That's a third grade. It used to be when they entered junior high school. Now it's in the third grade. The age of onset has gone down to 9 years. Third grade girls are starting to diet and starve themselves to look thin. Anorexics seem to have a fear of gaining weight. These individuals tend to have a tendency to perfectionism and a low self-esteem. Death rates for anorexics range from 4 to 20%. This is the most deadly mental illness that known to man. It's not schizophrenia. It's not schizophrenics committing suicide. It's not bipolars committing suicide. It's not people with borderline personality committing suicide. It's anorexics. 4 to 20%. Bulimia nervosa is a disorder characterized by binge eating and the obsessively ridding oneself of the food that has been eaten. They vomit, they use laxatives, they use diuretics, they use excessive exercise to lose all their weight. Bulimia actually means ox hunger, as in hungry enough to eat an ox. That's why they call them bulimics. When binging, these individuals eat as if they were famished to the point of uncomfortably distending their stomachs. They look pregnant. Their stomachs are so distended. These individuals are notorious for eating and purging in secret. Bulimic will often have secret stashes of forbidden food stashed away throughout their house that they can eat in private and purge quickly. It's usually soft stuff like cakes. Cake goes down easy and it comes back up without hurting you because it's soft. Okay. So they eat a lot of cakes. They don't want to eat anything sharp like cookies. Cookies have edges to them. When it comes back up, it cuts their throat. So they eat soft things. Twinkies are very popular. Twinkies you can eat in one gulp, as strange as that may seem. Hot dogs. You don't want to eat you don't want to eat steak. You don't want to eat something that isn't going to come up comfortably. Hot dogs are relatively soft and they come back up easily. Much of the cause of bulimia in particular and eating disorders in general stems from perceptions of acceptable appearance for females on television. When television was introduced to Fiji, 3% of the women on the island vomited to stay slender. Before that, they didn't care what they looked like. 3 years later, the percentage of vomiters was 15%. So in 3 years of watching television, these individuals wanted to look like tall, skinny European ladies, the ladies on Fiji. Fashion models maintain a body weight 13 to 19% below that of the women they are modeling their clothes for. This is a lady from Taiwan. Is she anorexic or is she not? Well, that's a good question. Maybe she just comes from skinny jeans. She's awfully slender. While binging and purging may occur millions of times a week around the United States, it is not without its negative effects. Dental complications, it hollows the acid that you're vomiting from your stomach will eat the inside of your teeth. These individuals will get what they call shadow teeth or ghost teeth. Greater possibility of alcohol abuse because alcohol makes it easier to vomit. Greater possibility of drug abuse, high rates of depression, greater risk of suicide, stomach and acid burns to the esophagus and throat, loss of tooth enamel, and that's what the dental complications are. Heart problems, they tend to get arrhythmias because they don't have the food in their stomach that normalizes their metabolism. Menstrual problems, of course, because their weight is going up and down so radically. And of course, electrolyte imbalances from vomiting so much. Binge eating disorder has become an international problem. For the first time in history of humanity, there are as many people in the world who are overweight as those who are underweight. In the United States, where obesity is defined as more than 30 pounds over one's ideal weight, obesity has increased from 15% in 1980 to 33% in 2005. Binge eating disorder affects 4.6% of the population at large. Binge eating is eating until the individual is uncomfortably full. People tend to be eating in response to emotional states rather than to true hunger signals. So they're depressed, so they're eating more. These individuals tend to have frequent episodes of eating large quantities of food, feeling a lack of control where food is concerned, eating rapidly and swallowing food without chewing, eating despite being uncomfortably full, eating when not feeling hungry, eating away from others so that they won't see your volume of intake, feeling disgusted because of the lack of control of food, and having a preference for high carbohydrates and foods with high fat content. And that's usually, of course, junk food. Okay. Binge and compulsive eaters do not seem to know how to pace themselves, eating rapidly and in massive amounts until they feel painfully uncomfortable. Each eating may be done to control anxiety. Food seems to have a calming and sedating effect on some people. Adolescents who eat when they are depressed are twice as likely to suffer from obesity or bulimia. They are also twice as likely to suffer from anorexia, of course. Okay. Compulsive overeaters are more likely to suffer from high blood pressure, high cholesterol, circulatory problems, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, along with 15 million other Americans, sleep apnea, gallbladder disease, gout, arthritis, 15 to 60% greater risk of cancer. They exhibit high rates of depression. They become distressed and develop a negative body image. They allow their self-esteem to suffer badly. We have all these digestive problems, and of course they're compulsively overeating. They're eating foods they probably shouldn't be eating. So they have all kinds of interesting problems like high cholesterol. Gout is another problem. Gallbladder disease. Gallbladder produces enzymes to break down fat in your stomach. So the more fat you eat, the more cholecystokinin that you are producing. The cholecystokinin breaks down fat. You're more likely to develop gallstones, which is relatively common. Relatively common today since we have so many people that are eating such fatty foods. Really kind of bizarre. All these different problems just because these individuals are overeating. Sexual addiction is marked by sexual behavior that the individual has little control over and little choice. This type of behavior might be practiced by young or old, gay or straight, and male or female. The addiction not only includes sexual contact with another individual, but arousal through masturbation, viewing pornography, serial affairs, phone sex, visits to topless bars, and visits to strip shows. There you go. Okay. So it can be anything. Now, why in the world are we even talking about this? Well, the reality is if you ever get into the business and you ever start counseling people, you're going to run into these people. And they're going to to think that it's perfectly normal to go to the strip bar every night, to go to topless bars, to view pornography 8 hours a day, just like the video game player is playing his video games. This guy watches pornography or looks at pornography all day long. Does nothing else. And they think it's normal. They're in denial. Sometimes sexual addiction can involve illegal activity, such as prostitution, sexual harassment. There was a case of an Olympian. She was a middle distance runner. And after she was addicted to the excitement of the race. And she made it all the way to the Olympics. She never medaled in the Olympics, but she ran in the Olympics. So after she was too old to run anymore, she turned to prostitution. She was addicted to the excitement of running. And she needed to recapture the excitement. And the way that she did that was by becoming a call girl. So she would dress all up, that was part of the excitement, just like getting ready for a race. She would go into the bathroom and she would prepare herself for whatever was going to happen next, just like when she was running. And then she would go and perform illicit sex with some guy that paid her lots and lots of money. And it was because of the excitement. She was a relatively famous individual. She finally she got caught. She got caught, and part of the plea deal was that she would tell her story. And she told her story to Sports Illustrated. And of course they printed it up, and everybody was shocked that this individual would turn to prostitution. But she admitted that there were other individuals who needed that excitement, the excitement of the competition. And the way that they were getting it was through prostitution, as interesting as that is. Sexual harassment, of course, an individual that is an addict to sex. They have so much sex that it becomes routine for them. They seek to not be routine anymore, so they may do things like sexually harass individuals or sexually abuse individuals. Potentially they will expose themselves to people they shouldn't be exposing themselves to, and that of course is known as exhibitionism. They may molest children, they may become serial rapists, or they may rape their own family members, and this is known as incest. By 2007 there were over 4 million pornographic sites on the internet. 40 million Americans visit these sites regularly. 70% of the visits are during work hours. 70% of the visits are during work hours. So they're stealing time from their job. 10% of the people surfing the porno sites are addicted to online pornography and spend up to 8 hours a day viewing sexual material. Worldwide, the pornography industry clears $57 billion a year. In the United States, the pornographic industry clears $12 billion a year. Much of the pornography is filmed and photographed in the San Fernando Valley outside of Los Angeles. So when you see, if you look at a pornographic site and you see an individual having sex with somebody, this is probably taking place in one of those cheap-ass houses in San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. My son used to live in Los Angeles. His next-door neighbor was a producer of XXX rated movies. She didn't make the movies. She wasn't in the movies, but she made the movies. And she offered my son money to be in any of these movies. And of course, he refused because he's a Boy Scout. He's a weird kid. Anyway, it's money, kid. Come on, go. No, he didn't do it. But she wouldn't leave him alone. She just kept pestering him. And finally, he moved someplace, and she got arrested. All kinds of interesting things happened after that. He became a bartender. Made more money, of course. Didn't have to worry about pornography. 3 to 6% of the U.S. population are sex addicts. 80% of the sex addicts are male, of course. Sexual addiction usually starts in the teen years and then peaks between the ages of 20 to 40, after which it slowly declines. These individuals, a lot of times, they're very attractive individuals. Women are willing to be seduced by them, or they are seducing these select individuals. They get used to whatever they want, to what, as frequently as they want. Sexual addicts seem to suffer from their other addictions in conjunction with their sexual problems. The DSM-4-TR identifies several paraphilias. The DSM-5 also has these same paraphilias: exhibitionism, fetishism, voyeurism, pedophilia, sexual masochism, sexual sadism, transvestic fetishism, and voyeurism. And of course, all of these things are against the law. Fetishism isn't really against the law. Voyeurism is against the law. Pedophilia, masochism and sadism, as long as it's a willing adult, another willing adult, is not against the law. Transvestic fetishism, dressing like the opposite sex, is not against the law. But voyeurism, of course, is. Other sexual addictions include love addiction, the desire to fall in love and be in love. Relationship addiction, the need to be in a relationship with an individual. It may mean maintaining multiple relationships at any one time. I used to have a girlfriend who always had a guy on the side. So you wanted to be the guy on the side, not the person that she was dating, because then she was cheating on you, and that wasn't a good thing at all. But like an idiot, I of course became a boyfriend, and then I was the guy that was being cuckolded. That's what they call it. She messes around on it, and so it was kind of a depressing time. It was stupid on my part, but she was very attractive and very seductive. Anyway, that was relationship addiction. She had a relationship addiction. Had a student back up in Montana who was never alone. She'd break up with her boyfriend, and by the next day she had a new boyfriend. She had a love addiction. She needed to be loved. Of course, if you look at her family history, you could understand. She was rejected by both her mother and her father, and she was always looking for love. Brilliant girl. Eventually, of course, she got married. Of course, I say of course. Eventually, she got married and she started having babies, and now she's happy as a clam. But then again, she's found somebody that she doesn't really trust people. She doesn't trust males. She doesn't trust females. But she found somebody that she could trust, which is kind of exciting for her. Individuals suffering from any sexual addiction maintain little, if any, control over their behavior. Despite adverse consequences, the individual will continue to obsess over the behavior to the distraction of everything else. And of course, the character of Charlie Sheen's character on 2.5 Men was a sexual addict. And it turns out Charlie Sheen's is actually a sexual addict, and of course he's dying from AIDS now, which is kind of unexciting, I guess. Not that exciting anyway. What am I doing? Okay. Compulsive sexual behavior is repeated because of the release of the pleasure-inducing neurotransmitters dopamine, enkephalin, and endorphins. Tolerance to these neurotransmitters leads to a need for the addict to spend more and more time in their sexual activity to gain the same mental benefits. Damage can be done to their careers, of course, relationships, self-image, and their peace of mind. So this is really kind of a dangerous one. The sexual addiction becomes the driving force in the addict's life. Part of the drive for the addict may be the risk that they are taking to achieve their target behavior. Usually the addict will culminate the behavior through orgasm, though in some cases it may involve exposure or fondling. The trigger behavior is often followed by remorse, guilt, fear of discovery, resolution to stop the behavior. The sexual behavior is often pursued with a sense of desperation, self-loathing, despair, and low self-image. Fascinating thing, in the United States, of course, sexual addiction has to do with orgasm, but in Japan it doesn't. In Japan, a lot of times it has to do with fondling. That is the end product. That's what they're seeking. So there are a lot of individuals, there are a lot of adult male individuals who are relatively well-to-do, who will get on crowded subway cars. They'll make their way to a female and they will fondle her. And this is the idea. The idea is, and of course if she tries to look around, the game is for her not to see them. That's the game. So the end product is the fondling and also not being caught. So as you can see, this is a sexual addiction as well. Really kind of a serious situation. For a while there in the 90s, they were doing this to schoolgirls. And in Japan, of course, they all wear uniforms. Everybody wears the school kids wear a uniform. So this was part of the game. Part of the game was fondling a prepubescent or pubescent female. And if you could steal her underwear, if you could tear her underwear off and capture her underwear, that was a mark of stupidity, I guess. But it was also a mark that you had done something. Of course, totally different situation, totally different culture, so totally different sexual proclivities. We'll stop right here. We'll pick this up next time. I hate to even